Have mercy, my king.
I am the supreme leader. How dare you challenge my reign?
It is
Set fire
said
to
that
the
when
heart.
tyranny or brutality rules the land,
Burn them
the
all.
gods will rise up and strike down the oppressors. This time, we fear they took too long.
Let me tell you a story. King Bamade stomped into the village square, his crown glinting, eyes sharp, demanding every farmer pay double taxes immediately. The villagers trembled, clutching their meager harvests, whispering prayers as the guards shoved them forward, collecting sacks of wheat and yams. One poor farmer, Ifeanyi, trembled as he brought his last bag, knowing this was all he had to feed his family. "Give more," roared the king, his voice echoing over the crowd, striking fear into the hearts of every struggling villager. Ifeanyi dropped the bag, dust rising, and knelt begging, "My king, this is all I own. Please spare my family." The Bamade laughed, cruel and booming, striking his golden scepter on the ground. Spare? There is no mercy for those who owe. The villagers gasped as guards pressed closer, shoving Ifeanyi roughly, his children crying and mothers wailing at the injustice. The king turned to his treasury, delighted at the sight of overflowing sacks of grain, his hunger for wealth never satisfied. As Ifeanyi was dragged away, an old servant, Ifeanyi, quietly slipped behind the guards, reaching for a hidden loaf of bread. Ifeanyi kissed the bread in Ifeanyi's children's hands, whispering, "Eat quickly, before anyone sees." The king notices nothing. The guards failed to see Ifeanyi's act, and the children devoured the bread silently, their eyes wide with relief and hope. Bamade returned to the palace, ignoring the cries, laughing at the sight of his subjects broken, weak, and desperate before him. Outside the walls, the wind shifted strangely, carrying a low rumble, yet no storm came, and the villagers shivered, sensing a quiet warning. In his golden hall, the king feasted, counting coins, dreaming of more land to seize, blind to the eyes silently watching him. Ifeanyi moved through the shadows, delivering small coins and bread to the suffering, the hidden hero of the poor, unnoticed by all. The villagers whispered of the king's cruelty, unaware that the god Sango observed, measuring hearts and waiting for the moment of justice. That night, the skies darkened briefly, lightning flickering above the palace, though no storm formed, shaking Bamade's gold and crown lightly. The king muttered in irritation, "Fools, even the skies bow to my will," ignorant that a higher power quietly watched every act. Ifeanyi returned home with his children, hearts heavy, yet secretly warmed by Ifeanyi's kindness, a small spark of hope in dark times. And so the first day of greed ended, the kingdom suffering silently as Sango began watching, waiting patiently for the king to falter. King Bamade rode through his kingdom, eyes cold, declaring the sacred ancestral farmland his property for his own lavish crops. The villagers fell silent, fear gripping their hearts, knowing the land had been blessed by ancestors for countless generations. He tore down fences, chopped sacred trees, and planted his crops, ignoring warnings shouted by trembling elders and frightened farmers. An elder stepped forward, voice shaking. "Great king, the ancestors will not forgive the desecration of their sacred fields, sir." Bamade laughed cruelly, raising his golden scepter. "Ancestors, their land is mine. Obey me or suffer the consequences." When it was time for harvest, the king's new crops withered, leaves shriveled, and fruits rotted on the branches before anyone could gather them. The royal cooks prepared his feast, yet every dish turned foul, the meat bitter, and the finest sauces sour on golden plates. Servants fell ill, mourning and clutching stomachs, collapsing on the palace floors, writhing under a sickness unseen, spreading rapidly through the household. All except one, Ifeanyi, the old servant, remained untouched, his health preserved as if protected by an unseen hand above the palace walls. Ifeanyi moved quietly through the palace, filling a small bag with gold coins and secretly slipping outside to help sick villagers in need. He distributed coins and food to the hungry, relieving families who could not pay their own taxes while avoiding detection from guards and servants alike. The villagers whispered thanks, hearts lifted by his kindness, unaware that the God-watching spared only this servant for his mercy. The king tasted the spoiled feast, fury burning in his chest. "What witchcraft curses my food?" he shouted, slamming his fist on the marble floor. Guards searched the palace, interrogating servants and cooks, while Bamade stormed through his rotting fields, kicking withered plants in blind, furious rage. Lightning flickered above the palace, though no storm arrived, shadows dancing across walls, striking fear quietly into anyone who dared watch the sky. Bamade blamed witches, traitors, and even the elders he had banished, but refused to repent, blind to the warning flashing in every rotten crop. Ifeanyi returned to tend the sick, giving water and comfort, moving quietly among the suffering while the king raged in his gold-filled halls. By nightfall, the palace fell silent except for moans, the first warning from Sango passed, sparing only the servant whose kindness would matter. The villagers slept uneasily, and the god Sango, patient and silent, waited, watching the king's heart, preparing the next strike of justice. The god had spoken once and waited.
King Bamade bellowed from his golden balcony. "Every able-bodied villager will labor. Build my grand palace before the next moon rises." Men, women, and even boys struggled to haul stones, their hands blistered, backs bending, sweat dripping into the dusty courtyard below. A cart overturned, spilling rocks onto two exhausted workers. They groaned, pinned beneath the weight, while guards laughed at their pain. The king stomped his feet, demanding more hammers and ropes, his voice cutting through the clanging metal like a whip across flesh. Ifeanyi darted through shadows, offering water from a hidden jug, lifting the injured and muttering softly, "Stay alive, you will need strength tomorrow." A worker fainted under the noon sun, heat blistering the skin, and Ifeanyi dropped a loaf of bread beside him before disappearing unseen. Wood splintered as beams were dragged into place. A boy's foot was crushed, cries echoing, yet the king only ordered louder labor. By evening, drums that celebrated harvests and festivals fell silent, replaced by the hammering of iron and the groans of the exhausted. From the unfinished walls, strange echoes appeared, footsteps with no owner, shadows moving in corners, whispers carried on wind, stirring unease through the palace. Ifeanyi paused to watch the faint shimmer of lightning in the courtyard, though no storm brewed, the air heavy with a warning none could name. Workers collapsed one by one, bodies crumpled in heaps. Ifeanyi lifted them, passing bread and water, risking exposure to guards roaming with whips. The king inspected the palace towers, smiling at each perfect stone, unaware that unseen eyes traced every act, every cruelty, and every faltering step. At midnight, a sudden tremor shook the half-built walls, dust falling from rafters, faint footsteps echoing above the sleeping king's chambers. Ifeanyi hid among shadows, breathing softly, leaving a satchel of gold and food beside a young girl, curled in exhaustion, tears staining her face. Lightning flickered silently across the marble floor, illuminating the king's smug face, while a voice of wind whispered, heavy, patient, invisible, a warning unheeded. The next morning, stones shifted oddly, scaffolding creaked as though alive, and animals in the courtyard hissed at unseen movement among the walls. Villagers walked on, fearing death, but inspired silently by Ifeanyi's small acts, a single spark of hope amid relentless pain and tyranny. And from the palace walls, a shadow watched the king sleep, vast and silent, Sango waiting for the moment when justice would strike.
King Bamade surveyed the kingdom, eyes sharp, declaring the famine of his people irrelevant. All grain belonged to him alone. The royal granaries overflowed, stacked high with golden crates, while villagers clawed at the dusty earth, struggling to find even a single kernel. He ordered his guards to confiscate every last sack from merchants, farmers, and traders, leaving the streets silent and hopeless. Servants carried baskets of grain to the palace kitchens, yet the people outside starved, clutching their bellies, eyes wide with fear. Ifeanyi slipped through the shadows, carrying a small bowl filled with grain, delivering it secretly to widows and children trembling at the gates. The king's children sat at the table, plates untouched, their eyes filled with hunger, yet servants were forbidden to give them anything. Suddenly, flames erupted in the royal kitchens, licking the walls and crackling without warning, smoke filling the golden hall with heat. Cooks screamed and ran, tossing pots and pans into the fire, while guards struck at the flames helplessly, panic spreading through the palace. Rats abandoned the granaries entirely, refusing to touch the once sought food, squealing and scurrying into the shadows, unseen by the greedy king. Bamade banged his fist on the table, shouting, "What trickery is this? Who dares curse my palace and gold?" He lifted his cup of wine, ignoring the smoke and fleeing servants, laughing. "If the gods are angry, let them speak louder." Meanwhile, Ifeanyi's bowl never emptied. He gave grain, water, and coins to widows and starving children, moving unseen through alleys and streets. One mother wept, clutching her son, while Ifeanyi pressed bread into their hands, whispering, "Eat quickly and live. The gods watch silently tonight." The palace trembled with a quiet energy, shadows twisting unnaturally, smoke rising into shapes that seemed almost alive, yet the king saw nothing. The royal children whimpered, reaching for food that would not touch their lips, while Ifeanyi moved between them silently, offering what little he could spare. Guards ran in circles, trying to douse the flames, but the fire seemed guided, striking only the king's household while leaving Ifeanyi untouched. Bamade cursed loudly, blaming cooks, merchants, even witches for the chaos, but his heart remained stubborn, unyielding, greedy as ever. Outside, villagers whispered, noticing smoke above the palace, trembling at the knowledge that unseen power moved in anger and warning. By midnight, the fire died, the granaries silent, and the palace rattled as though a giant walked its halls, recording every act of cruelty. The sky listened and remembered his words.
King Bamade summoned the elders at dawn, anger blazing, accusing them of poisoning the people's minds with complaints and dangerous truth. The elders stood firm, leaning on staffs, warning him that greed weakens kingdoms faster than war or famine ever could. One elder stepped forward, voice calm, saying the gods were watching closely, waiting for humility before justice arrived uninvited. The king exploded in rage, striking the ground with his scepter, ordering guards to seize every elder immediately without mercy. Villagers cried out as the elders were dragged through dust, their wisdom silenced, their voices swallowed by fear and authority. Drums of council stopped beating that very day, leaving the kingdom without guidance, memory, or restraint against reckless power. The elders were banished beyond the borders, forced to wander forests and barren roads, their warnings scattered into the wind. That night, the land felt strangely heavy, as though breath itself had thickened, pressing uneasily against every sleeping chest. Across the kingdom, people dreamed dark dreams of falling walls, cracking earth, and thunder walking slowly through empty palaces. Children woke screaming, elders wept quietly, and warriors trembled, sensing something vast, staring beyond sight or sound. Ifeanyi crept through the night, guiding one frail elder into a hidden hut, risking death to protect fading wisdom. He shared food, water, and whispered apologies, bowing deeply before the elder, honoring truth the king had rejected. The elder spoke softly of justice that waits patiently, warning Ifeanyi that kindness would soon carry unbearable weight. Within the palace, King Bamade slept restlessly, plagued by dreams of shadows standing beside his bed, watching silently. He awoke sweating, dismissing the dreams as weakness, laughing loudly to convince himself he remained untouchable by gods. The elder's absence spread quickly. Disputes turned violent, lies replaced counsel, and fear ruled where wisdom once stood. Ifeanyi noticed the change, hearing harsher voices, seeing colder eyes, feeling the kingdom drifting without its moral compass. At night, thunder rumbled faintly without storms, and the moon hid behind clouds, as though refusing to witness events unfolding. The god Sango remained unseen, yet his presence weighed heavily, dreams growing darker as patience slowly thinned. There would be no one left to warn the king.
King Bamade stood before the crowd, laughing loudly, declaring no god ruled above him, for he alone commanded earth and sky. He lifted his crown high and shouted that ancestors were dust, spirits were myths, and his throne would last forever. The people trembled, heads lowered, as his words cut through the air like blades daring the heavens to answer. That night, clouds gathered suddenly, thick and black, though no rain fell and no wind stirred the palace grounds. Without warning, lightning struck only the king's chambers, shattering stone walls while the rest of the palace stood untouched. The golden crown cracked down the middle, splitting with a sharp sound that echoed through silent corridors. The king's supporters screamed as visions seized them, eyes wide, bodies shaking, seeing fire, falling earth, and judgment racing toward them. Some clawed at walls, others begged unseen voices, while guards dropped weapons, crying that the palace itself was alive. Yet, Ifeanyi stood calm and unharmed, the lightning passing him like mist, his body untouched by terror or fear. He moved through chaos, guiding the shaking and injured away from collapsing walls, offering water and steady words. The sky roared again, thunder rolling low and deep, shaking bones, warning with power, restrained but unmistakably divine. Bamade staggered from his chambers, clutching his cracked crown, fury burning brighter than fear in his defiant eyes. He raised his fist toward the sky and shouted curses, daring the gods to show themselves or bow before him. Lightning flashed again, closer this time, illuminating his face, revealing arrogance untouched by regret or understanding. Supporters fell to their knees, whispering apologies to the sky, but their loyalty chained them to the king's fate. Ifeanyi watched silently, heart heavy, knowing this mercy spared him for the final time, his path now clearly chosen. Across the kingdom, people woke screaming from the same dream, seeing the earth open and a throne swallowed whole. The storm vanished as suddenly as it came, leaving cracked stone, shattered pride, and silence heavy with meaning. King Bamade laughed shakily, convincing himself he had survived another threat, blind to the truth standing before him. Mercy had spoken its last word. King Bamade issued his final command, demanding every remaining possession from the people, declaring nothing would be spared this time. The message spread quickly, yet no protests followed, no cries rose, and no voices challenged the order anymore. Villagers arrived quietly, placing food, livestock, cloth, and coins before the palace without hesitation or resistance. Mothers stepped forward first, laying down bowls, then pulling children back without tears or pleading. Fathers followed, emptying their hands slowly, eyes fixed on the ground, as if already finished with fear. The king watched in satisfaction, mistaking silence for loyalty, believing hunger had finally taught obedience. Guards moved through the crowd, collecting everything efficiently, disturbed only by how calm the people appeared. Ifeanyi walked beside them with a basket, but turned away widows, orphans, and the starving. He left them untouched, refusing silently, even as guards began watching him closely. One guard stepped forward, demanding why Ifeanyi skipped certain people during the king's final collection. Ifeanyi answered calmly that nothing could be taken from those who had already lost everything. The guard opened his mouth to shout, then paused, unsettled by the sudden heaviness pressing against his chest. The air thickened noticeably, breathing became slow, and footsteps sounded dull against the earth. Birds vanished from the trees, insects disappeared, and the village fell into an unnatural stillness. A tremor rolled through the ground, strong enough to feel, forcing several guards to steady themselves.
Villagers exchanged silent glances, understanding something final had begun moving beneath their feet. The king laughed loudly, ordering faster collection, mocking the silence as proof of his absolute power. Another tremor followed, longer this time, cracking dust from walls and silencing the king's laughter briefly. Ifeanyi felt the presence clearly now, vast and awake, no longer waiting, no longer observing. Justice no longer waited. King Bamade stood before the silent crowd, demanding celebration, declaring himself victorious over hunger, fear, and every watching god. The ground shook violently beneath his feet, stronger than before, splitting stone tiles and knocking guards flat instantly. A thunderous voice filled the air, calm and absolute, announcing that patience had ended and judgment had arrived at last. Sango appeared without fire or fury, standing solid as the earth itself, his presence freezing every breath. The king screamed defiance, ordering his guards forward, but no man moved, no weapon lifted, no command obeyed. The earth cracked open behind the throne, wide and deep, swallowing the greedy king, his guards, and all loyal supporters without resistance. Supporters fled, pushing and screaming, but the ground opened again, dragging them down alongside their stolen power and pride. Bamade screamed as he fell, clutching his broken crown, shouting promises of repentance that came far too late. The ground sealed shut smoothly, leaving the palace intact only in ruins, the gold untouched for the people, and the kingdom free from tyranny. Silence followed, heavy and final, broken only by frightened breaths and the settling earth. Ifeanyi stepped forward, calm and unmoving, having chosen mercy every time power demanded cruelty. Sango declared him known, tested and chosen long before judgment fell upon the wicked. The god commanded the people to raise him, naming him king by justice, not blood or conquest. The people obeyed immediately, lifting Ifeanyi high, voices breaking as fear finally released its grip. Ifeanyi ordered food shared first, homes restored, and the hungry fed before any crown touched his head. The land responded instantly, rivers flowing freely, birds returning, and the earth settling peacefully once more. Sango vanished as quietly as he appeared, justice completed without further warning or delay. The people crowned Ifeanyi king, not with gold, but with trust earned through sacrifice and courage. And the kingdom flourished again,